Are you looking for ideas to use up your 8x8 pattern paper? Hi, I'm Jess from JessCrafts.com and I'm here to help you make the most of your crafty supplies and time. So let's get making. Today I have this totally Owlsome pad from the Paper Boutique. This is made in the UK, so I like to try to mix it up, and hopefully this means it's more available to international crafters. So I have this paper busting template number 2. There's been another one before this, and this one does work with directional pattern paper, which is pretty key because a lot of the 8x8 paper I've seen is directional, and especially with the paper pad that I purchased. So I'm going to notice that when I pick my papers, I'm going to think about, okay, well, I see that the sketch calls for these kind of small strips of pattern paper about 1 inch wide, and I want to make sure that that's going to look good. So I'm going to think about, if I were lined up here on my craft sheet, if I were to cut a piece of this paper 1 inch, and I can see from my craft sheet that's 1 inch, I'm like, oh well, you know what, you can still see a lot of owls, so I think this paper is going to look nice. If I were to try the gray paper with the owls, I have a feeling this one's not going to look quite as good. So my instinct is to go with the other one. I will say, you know, it's a pretty okay. It's a little bit more, because they're so regular, I kind of like this one better as small strips. And actually one of the strips is even going to be 0.75, which would look a little bit more awkward to me with this pattern paper. So that's my logic there. And then because I'm going to use this pattern paper that is mostly white in the background, I want to pair it. I like to mix my patterns. You could make this. So the template makes 2 cards with 1 sheet of paper. You can make it all with just this 1 sheet. I like to mix my patterns. If the paper was double-sided, that would make it easy, and I would just use the other side. This is not double-sided paper. So I'm going to go in and get another sheet of paper from the collection. Specifically, I'm looking for this plaid because there's so much white in the background here. And then this has barely any white to it, so I think that they will look great together. My other option for a non-owl pattern paper is this white with snowflakes, and I'm going to use this as the inspiration for my embellishment, but I don't think the two of them together, I mean, they're really close, so in some ways they look good, but they don't contrast very much with each other, and I like a higher contrast, but I think that would be beautiful as well. Now let's get into the specifics of how you cut the pattern paper. How do you follow this sketch? The sketch says that you're going to cut your piece of 8x8 paper in half. So it will be 4 by 8 inches. You'll want to keep the directional nature of your paper. So you'll want to make sure that the top of the paper is at the top of your trimmer. 4 by 8 inches. Then you need 4 by 5 1/4. This means there will be no border, there'll be no cardstock mat around this. When I go to add my card base, I'm going to add it directly on there. You could do an 1/8 inch border if you like that. Then this remaining paper, I want to cut off 2 1 inch pieces and 1 3/4 inch piece. So 1 by 4 inches long. So this is the right length there. And I'm thinking it will be easier if I cut the 0.75 off first, so 3/4, and then I can line it up with the 1 inch. This trimmer is a little bit more challenging with small cuts, but overall I really like it because I never have to change the blades, and I am lazy and cheap like that. Okay, so these are all the pattern paper pieces I need. I will cut this other one the same way. I will cut the other sheet the same way. I'm just going to keep doing the same cuts. If you want to avoid having to make small cuts of paper off of other small cuts, you can instead start by just cutting the 3/4 inch, the 1 inch, the 1 inch. So here I start with my 8 inch length. I cut 3/4, 1 inch, 1 inch again, and that will leave me with my 4 by 5 1/4. I have chosen gray for my cardstock mats. These being all the pieces of pattern paper I cut are 4 inches wide, so it will be easy for me to cut this pattern paper to 4 1/4. And I have another 4 1/4 piece, so it's a really common measurement, and it's going to be a little bit less wasteful than some other sizes of other sizes of pattern paper, this cardstock I'll be able to use a little bit more completely. So I'm going to need some mats that are 1 1/4 inch and 1 inch. So again, I'm just going to take it from the 11-inch side and start measuring back. So 1 1/4. I find that easier than bringing this big long thing to 1 1/4 each time, making those small measurements. I like to cut off the long end. And 1 inch, and then 1 1/4. I think I did my math right there. You need some that are 1 inch. You need some that are 1 1/4. Just kind of cutting a couple. I am going to need to make sure that I have, for each card, I'm making 4 cards because I use 2 pieces of paper. And so I need to make sure that I have 2 4 1/4 by 1 1/4 and 1 4 1/4 by 1 for each card. I'm going to walk you through the assembly of just 1 card, but there will be 3 other cards made the same way, just with slightly different. 2 of them will be slightly different patterns. So I'm going to make one where this big piece of plaid paper is in the background. There'll be 2 like that, and 2 will have the large piece of owl paper in the background. I really find my Altenew mat quite helpful in these situations because it has that A2 card centered around it, so you can just put your card over it, and that will allow you to find the center points for things like these stripes. However, you could of course just tape this off on your mat or draw it on your mat, things like that. But it's one of the little advantages of this large work surface, and it's like one of those little touches that kind of shows it was designed by a crafter for crafters. Okay, so I've centered the thinnest piece, which is 1 inch by 4 1/4, and then I'll put the 4 inch by 3 1/4 centered again on top of it. Then I need to add my larger pieces, and there's 2 of them, one for the top and one for the bottom. I'm putting it a 1/2 inch from the bottom, and now I know I can do the same thing on the top. This is where that grid mat again is just so helpful. I'm not too worried about making things straight all the time. I'm kind of fine with eyeballing it, but again, when it's, you know, something makes it this simple. And then something to consider is if you are making one and then you need the rest to be kind of similar, but rather than being so careful about 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch kind of thing, I'll put my second card next to it, and then I'll just line them up against each other and just put them down like that. So I know that the 2 cards match, and I've done the careful measuring only on one, but this mat makes it so easy, it's not really that much of a time saver. So that's what the sketch shows you, but we're gonna finish off our card. I was inspired by the background, and it features these yellow snowflakes, which is a little bit unusual, but I love that about it. I just love that it's a bold choice to make yellow snowflakes. So this is the Sunshine cardstock from Simon Says Stamp. A lot of times I will use Recollections, and that's what this gray cardstock is. But some colors you just need to go with the name brand because they're not available in like the Park Lane or Recollections, Michaels, etc. Park Lane's from Joann's. So sometimes I pay a little extra to get a very specific color, and in this case it's worth it because this brings out the really bold yellow from this pattern paper. I have this large snowflake from the Lawn Fawn Stitched Snowflakes, and then I have some sentiments that, as you saw before, were part of this paper pad. So this paper pad has there's 6 of these. They have these sentiment sheets. There are, I believe, 6 pattern papers and then 36 papers in all, so each of them has 6. So there's 6 of this little owl and 6 of these big owls, but there's also 6 of these. So you have a ton of sentiments. Almost a little too many in my opinion, but I do really love this paper, super cute. And I could see using them because they're just gray and yellow. They're pretty versatile, especially all the grays. So I'm going to pull out some gray sentiments that I specifically picked the grays because I want them to stand out against the yellow. And I picked sentiments that were very general. So yes, this is a winter card, but I'm not going to make it say Happy Winter or Merry Christmas or anything like that. And I think that I want this to be centered on the snowflake. And my instinct is usually to put something in the bottom right-hand corner. But in this instance, if I did that, it would be between the two stripes. I'm not liking that as a design decision. So I think I'm going to do something that is not necessarily my instinct, but go smack dab in the middle this time. Because again, if I were to do, because a lot of my other instinct might be center it, but at the top. I like that look a lot. I do that a lot. But it's between those two stripes. So I'm going to go smack dab in the center. I'm going to adhere my snowflake and my sentiment. I like to make my die cuts thick, but I don't want to have to use my much more expensive Simon Says stamp cardstock as all 3 layers. So I'm going to make 3 snowflakes and glue them together. But I really only need the top one to be that really beautiful specific color. And then the next 2 layers could be white, or they could just be a cheaper cardstock that matches pretty close in color and won't really be noticed as long as it's just a layer on the side. So, you know, maybe be peeking out a little, but I mean, come on, nobody's going to be checking and be like, oh, your yellow underneath there doesn't look precise or whatever. And also, if anything, they'll probably just be like, oh, they did that on purpose. So that's what I'm doing there. I'm gluing. I have my Barely Art glue. I have this little glue stand that keeps my Barely Art glue always ready to go because it's always leaning down the tip. And I've seen, that's from Make It by Marco on Etsy. She gifted that to me a long time ago, and I've used it ever since because it doesn't get knocked down. There's the ones you can insert into, and those can be great for those smaller glue pens, but this larger glue bottle, I really like to lean it like that so that my glue is always at the tip, always ready to go. Then I can glue this down. You want to make sure that you put enough pressure everywhere. This is going to, part of it's going to glue to that background plaid, and part of it's going to glue to the owls. And it's technically a little bit uneven, but the fact that I've added those 3 layers, the 3 die cuts together, is going to make that a little bit less noticeable. And that's one of my motivations for going so thick with these die cuts this particular time. Then my sentiment, I've put on a scrap piece of like thick cardstock you get in packaging, just to again give it some dimension because I'm going to be laying it across this really bumpy snowflake and I want it to really stand on its own. And I've just put some tape behind that. Glue would do the job as well. If you found this video inspiring, here's another video where you can find more ideas for enjoying your crafty time and supplies. Let me know you like this video with a share to your crafty community, subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss the next template tutorial, and check the video description for product links. See you in the next video.